Good afternoon, everybody. This is the side event operated by Climate Change Center. Thank you for being here today. We will need 2 or 3 minutes to be prepared for us. We'll be started in 2 or 3 minutes. Hope you enjoy our side event. Thank you.
네, 아니 뒤에 있으셔가지고. 네, 오케이. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jong Kim from Chungang University and the committee member of the Climate Change Center in Korea. Welcome to our seminar. And I really thank you on behalf of the Climate Change Center. From now on, we are going to have a seminar regarding voluntary carbon market in general. First of all, I'm going to invite former Ministry of Environment, Yoo for the opening remark. Let's give her a warm hand.
Good afternoon, distinguished participants and ladies and gentlemen. It is a great privilege and my pleasure to be part of this historic COP27. I would like to welcome you all to this side event co-organized by the Institute for Applied Ecology of Germany and OPEHM of Morocco, and our center, the Climate Change Center of Republic of Korea. The latest IPCC assessment report is a wake-up call that we are not on track to realize our climate goals. Global warming will further intensify in the future. Climate projections also underscore that the average global temperature will continue to rise unless we make significant achievements to cut down greenhouse gas emissions. Although we made great strides to combat climate change in past years, these are not enough. We are now at a crossroad. Either we choose to accept this bleak future, or we stand together and work harder to achieve a faster rate of emission reductions. In this side event, we will highlight the voluntary carbon markets as a key strategy to help achieve the net zero and Paris Agreement goals. It will present some of the recent developments and actions in the public and private sectors and how to ensure the quality of these carbon markets to deliver the intended outcomes. VCM is needed to achieve the climate goals. It enables investors, governments, organizations, and businesses to voluntarily purchase verified emission reductions in the form of carbon credits. In 2021, it had sold a volume of more than $1 billion of carbon credits, which is a 59% increase in value over 2020. This was driven by the increased awareness of corporate responsibility and increasing consumer demand for more sustainable products. More people are now willing to pay higher premiums for greener products. This pressure companies to conform to sustainability compliance, such as ESG, invest more to transition into less carbon-intensive operations. and avail more carbon credits to offset their emissions. Recent years have also observed the proliferation of net zero targets across the private sector. Many companies have been using voluntary carbon markets and carbon offsetting to achieve their emission targets. The voluntary carbon market can also help finance climate change projects. An effective VCM, voluntary carbon markets, would increase capital flow to climate projects. However, as you may estimate, the voluntary carbon market is not perfect. They are criticized to enable greenwashing in climate actions. They are also questioned to be a way of paying for the right to pollute. Mechanisms to safeguard market integrity should be installed and strengthened. VCM should have high integrity and be transparent to ensure that they will deliver climate mitigation impacts. I look forward to the presentations and discussions of this side event. I hope this event will enlighten us with the new perspectives and could lead to stronger partnership. Thank you very much, and may God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, former Minister Dr. Yu, for welcoming remark. As she mentioned, the importance of the voluntary carbon market is increasing and increasing. Maybe in some years later, it might be skyrocketing, I think. As Fanala's presentations materials, she mentioned the size of the voluntary market is already exceed $1 billion already. So I think the compliance market and voluntary market in the futures might be a very important role to reduce carbon dioxide as well as the other greenhouse gases. So in this regard, it is very meaningful and insightful regarding voluntary market issues today. We have 5 distinguished presenters. Let me introduce briefly the 5 presenters. Each presenter will have 10 minutes or 13 minutes presenting time, and after the presenting time, we are going to have a very free discussions. Any kind of questions are really welcomed for the presenters. First speaker is Kisor. He is a Global Carbon Council members. He's going to discuss about the voluntary carbon markets and the funding. Actually, the funding role is crucial. The second presenter is Alex. He's going to introduce Korea carbon market and the necessity of the voluntary carbon market. So the speaker is Fanela. She belongs to GGGI in Korea. She is really a very hectic time, very busy time today, especially. So I wonder if she can breathe today, but I hope she can breathe and then relax. So she's going to make a presentation, the balance between the compliance and the voluntary market. So very interesting presenting. The first speaker is Pedro. He's going to have a carbon credit quality assurance for the carbon market, especially the credit, is another very important issues. So like there is a flood or there is a really transparent procedures, which is related to the quality issues. So he's going to discuss about that. And lastly, Hassan, he is really introducing Pakistan's real cases about voluntary carbon mechanisms. So please enjoy the 5 distinguished presenters. Okay, now I'm going to hand over the first presenters. Okay, sir, are you ready? Okay, yeah. Yeah, you can go. Now, floor is yours.
Hello. So thank you very much. Thank you to organizers for inviting Global Carbon Council for this very important topic of today about the voluntary carbon markets. And my presentation, which I focused on, is the VCM's critical role in financing in critical climate solutions. So the role is critical as well as solutions are also critical. I will take a little bit of bird's eye view, and then I will jump on the topic of this of today. So we have seen recently released UNEP gap report, which talks about the status of climate action, the NDCs, and what is required to be achieved for 1.5 degree. And we can clearly see that what is the scenario of unconditional NDC and what is required to be achieved for 1.5. There's a gap of about 23 gigatons. So it is said that about 65 to 70 gigatons are required to be achieved per year to be able to have a net zero world by gigatons reductions required to be achieved by per year to achieve a net zero world by 2050. And if that is the case, the 23 gigaton gap is huge. And who will meet that if the indices are not meeting? It is the corporates, private sector, and the organizations, businesses, they come together to be able to contribute to this. And that is where the voluntary carbon markets will play a big role in mitigating this gap. Even if I talk about 50% of this or 40% of this volume coming from the carbon credits issued by voluntary carbon markets, we are talking about 8 to 10 gigatons of the or billion carbon credits per year. To put the things in perspective, CDM in 16 years' time has issued 2 billion credits. So we can imagine the kind of a size of the markets that is going to play, and that is going to play a vital role in the innovative climate solutions. So the world is divided in the 3 layers. The global layer is okay. So the global layer is of the Paris Agreement, 1.5 degree target, approximate 60 to 70 gigatons reduction per year. Country level targets, the NDCs which are submitting NDCs to UNFCCC, and then the organizational layer which are doing their own part to contribute to the country to meet Paris Agreement objectives. And then the organization focus is on the inventories, implementing projects, achieving carbon neutrality, and then there is Article 6.2, 6.4, voluntary markets and non-market approaches like taxation and the regulations playing a role and helping the countries to meet their commitments. And then there is the aviation sector and maritime sector which are doing their own bit because they are not the part of UNFCCC emissions. And therefore this is kind of a mitigation framework that looks like for the future. Now, in this context, Global Carbon Council, let me talk in few slides about Global Carbon Council. We are a voluntary carbon market program. It's a global program. The objective is to achieve, to contribute to achieve Paris Agreement objectives and help NDCs raise its ambitions for the low carbon and sustainable economies. So we are the first and only in the MENA region, but we are based in Qatar. But we are the first and only program which is CORSIA and ICRO accredited, the only program in the global south, I would say. We have received full approval of CORSIA and conditional approval of ICRO. We are developing methodologies, our own methodology, but we also allow CDM methodologies to be used to submit the projects to us. We are registering projects from around everywhere, but so far 40 countries have submitted projects to us, and we issue carbon credits called ACCs, but also labels for environmental no harm, social no harm, contribution of project to sustainable development goals, and the CORSIA plus labels. So E plus, S plus, SDG plus labels. Our registry is operated by S&P Global. We are expecting to issue about, if everything goes well, 2 billion credits in 10 years time, with about 1445 projects which have already been submitted to us. So we are already, catalyzing the climate action on ground now, and a lot of MENA region projects are also coming, which remained underrepresented in the carbon markets for long time. So, and we are well placed to issue ITMOs in Article 6.2. Under Article 6.2, provided some fine tuning of those rules have been sorted out in this COP. So this is our CORSIA approval, and another approval is ICROA. We are approved for pilot phase, and we applied for the next phases as well, first phase. And ICROA, these two accreditation are the most important accreditation as of now, which talks about the integrity of carbon credit issued by us. And also, we are looking forward for ICVCM. I mean, when ICVCM comes, the CCP, we will definitely apply for CCP label as well. And so this is institutional framework. I would not go into details of this, but there is an advisory board, there is a steering committee responsible for acceptance of registration, making the decision on the registration and issuance. The project owners support us, verify us, they are all part of our framework, and an international protocol has been followed in issuance of the credits and the labels that we have. So we have, so this is about the credibility of the credits and the co-benefits of the projects to the environment and society. So we have a minimum performance track, which is at the minimum the project must reduce emissions. Those are real and additional emission reductions. And the project must contribute to goal number 13 on climate action. But the project owner can optionally apply for a E+, S+, and SDG+ label. SDG+ label is about contribution to environment and contribution to sustainable development, and higher are the number of the goals the project is contributing to, better the label they get, from bronze to diamond. So if, for example, more than 5 labels the project is contributing to, then it gets diamond. And of course there are standards which have been derived, which need to be followed, and every year the project owner need to monitor that they are still making the contributing to sustainable development as such. And then if all the 3 labels are there and the letter of authorization is received from the country, they get the CORSIA label as well. So I will just skip this slide. This is the list of the countries from where the projects are coming in, the mitigation activity types which are applied, renewable energy, waste management, transport, solar powered agriculture pumps, and solid waste management and biogas, etc. Then what we are doing for critical climate solutions that GCCP is developing the standards for. So we know that the renewable energy and cook stores and many these have been really exploited a lot. They have been already used by the world. But then there are many other climate action area which must come in play now, and we are developing standards for carbon capture and storage, carbon capture utilization, direct air capture, nature-based solution including forestry, smart agriculture, soil carbon, and we are also working on with the World Bank on the grid-connected battery storage for sectoral low carbon shift. We are also working on we have already approved a methodology on renewable energy-based desalination plant, particularly the MENA region where the project, the GCC is located. The desalination has a lot of carbon footprint, so anybody who is implementing desalination plant with the renewable energy, they can earn carbon credits. Water saving, desalinated water saving, if somebody does, they are also adding to the reduction of carbon footprint. Scaling up of buildings and neighborhoods, green hydrogen, electric vehicles, these are the areas we are working on. HFC refrigerant switch, Kigali Amendment has already talked about if someone moves from HFC refrigerant to hydrocarbons or other refrigerants, they are contributing to global, to the cause of global warming or to climate mitigation. So that is also an area we are working on, and also other priority mitigation area. From time to time we will reviewing it. So scaling up the market transactions, where we are also working on the carbon finance facility from an independent operator of the facility, which will provide project finance as well as spot transactions facility would be there. We are playing active role in the meta registry of the IHS market and the World Bank Climate Warehouse to make sure that double accounting, double registration, double issuance does not happen. We are connecting to exchanges to allow the scaled up market, and the blockchain platforms are talking to us. We have a standard to avoid double accounting, and I have a separate slide on this because this is the issue of what is under discussion right now in COP as well as in the voluntary carbon market player. And then we are, as I said, that we would be issuing ITMOs in coming months after this COP. And we had a couple of separate events on this, that how we see the interlinkages of the country's registries and our registry, and how the future architecture of ITMO issuance will look like. So how the countries can use VCMs to finance NDCs and raise ambitions. I mean, this is a very important area. The Glasgow has actually solved the riddle now, the COP in Glasgow. So VCMs can raise private sector finance to fund NDCs and help increase their ambition. Well, this is subject to the rules of letter of authorization, which we are receiving from the host party, and a letter of buying countries in case the ITMOs are to be issued. Because when the ITMOs are to be issued, we require both the countries to sign off the letter, the buying country and the selling country. But on the other side, when CORSIA credits are to be issued, then letter from the host country is needed to be able to issue those compliance credits. This is also subject to the claims made by the buyers following the VCMI code, the voluntary, voluntary carbon market integrity initiative of which has released the code for claim. These codes of claim will decide how the buyers are likely to use the carbon credits for. Then we are expecting that if the buyers are buying with the corresponding adjustment, we expect that they will sell at a higher price, because the countries will take an extra action for each of the credits sold outside of the country, as compared to those without corresponding adjustment. And therefore, this is just a proposal that the host parties may consider to open climate funds that will charge the fees to take care of the additional climate action towards the corresponding adjustment they apply. So this could also provide an additional finance for innovative climate action within the countries. So as you know, the corresponding adjustment riddle has been solved. The ITMOs, when they transfer from host country to the buying country, the inventory is added by respective amount in the host country, and GST inventory is subtracted by the respective amount in the receiving countries. So the world is now, I would say, divided in two parts. The credits are divided in two parts: those which are authorized for use by the host country and which are not authorized for use by host country. When it is authorized for use by host country, corresponding adjustment is needed, and they are used towards an NDC, or they can be used towards international mitigation purposes like CORSIA, or the voluntary carbon market buyer who insist on buying only with the corresponding adjustments. On the other side, when there is no corresponding adjustment, when no authorization letter is given, there is no need of corresponding adjustment to be applied by the host country, and these credits can be used purely for voluntary carbon market or for domestic purposes, subject to the rules or the codes of best practices released by VCMI. So I think I will stop here. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's really nice to see you here. I'm Alex Kim from South Korea. So I'm the CEO of ArtiECO, who's supplying the technical support to climate change CCC, the leading NGO of Korea. So we are developing the VCM, the platform for the Korean market, but actually we are trying to expand to the globally. So today is I will deliver my message to you guys about the Korean market situation, and each country now have their own goal to achieve the NDC target. Korea also has a target to achieve, but actually a lot of people, like I mean, it's the stakeholders know that it is really hard to achieve the target. That's why we think it is a time we need a VCM market in each country, including Korea. That one is I want to deliver. But still, as the Kishore mentioned, we have problems and obstacles to overcome. The one is that we also we should think about it, and we should provide the solution how to make it happen. So overall, the Korean government, we also have an NDC goal. The 2030 target is in the 40% in greenhouse gas reduction against the 2018 emission level. If we consider, as you see the graphic on the right side, the requiring at least 33.5 million tons. It's quite a lot, right? It also, we earn this amount. It's most on the Paris Agreement in Article 6. Regarding that, we assume that it's 11.5% out of the total green gas reduction target. As you see, it is a lot of amount. So again, my point is the Korean government, Korea has our own the target for the NDC. But as you see this in the page, the Korean carbon market, especially this, and we are saying the compliance market. The Korean government, we already launched in the KETS, that is in the Korean emission trading schemes, since 2015. We already passed in the first and the second national plans that holds the accumulated record is around almost 200 million tons. It's a lot. But as you see the graph, the problem is fluctuation, price-wise, and the total, the unit price, and also total, the trading, the amount. And third plan started from this year. As I mentioned, there still exists frequent fluctuation in the trading, the owned by the government side. Also, another issue that we see, the scale and unit price credit is still quite low compared to the European market. So again, let's back to we consider about the compliance market. To achieve the NDC goals, the Korean emission trading scheme should be revised. That one is we propose it. But that one is not perfect. That's why we also suggest that to implement limitation of the compliance market, Korea based in the global voluntary market is necessarily needed. So that one is the public sectors, also the NGOs, and the company like in the private sector, they also contribute how to make it happen. That is in the current situation we face. So again, that's back to now already I mentioned the compliance market of Korea, and we back to the Korean voluntary market side. The status, Korean companies in the VCM participation has been relatively low. Even, there are big global companies in Korea, like in Samsung and LG, Hyundai, but still, our awareness about that is quite low. But then another problem is that these in the global companies and also face, means in the South Korean global companies face great pressure from their supply chain. So to comply with the international greenhouse gas reduction effort. Because their supply chain, they are asking the ESG management also to regulate their carbon emission in global supply chain and the management of, the scope 3 emissions. That one is necessarily needed in the future. Everyone knows that, but still their awareness is low. That's what I mentioned to you guys. Also, I think it's all of you guys already visited a lot of the sessions and the pavilions, and they saying global trend says VCM carbon offsetting will be the great solution to compensate the problem of the compliance market. I think this one is in the general consensus each other. So I emphasize again the limitation and the requirement of the voluntary market. As the Mrs. Yu already mentioned that any market is not perfect yet, but we shouldn't stop. Also, as I mentioned, in the voluntary market will be one of the great solutions, but still it has a problem. So I say it's in the limitation and also the requirement we shouldn't overcome. The first one is an absence of standard guideline and also the guidance. We are still talking about each stakeholders about this, but we don't have any significant guidelines yet. And also, again, it's in the low-level awareness and also low-level the accessibility to the voluntary market yet. I already give you some examples of the big global companies in the Korea case. Also, as Kishu mentioned, we have another problem, like the establishing the linkage between the global stakeholders. Actually, the important thing, one of the key things like a double accounting, double payment is one of the issues. Because each country has their own regulation, and this one is hard to understand each other's. That's why I will say mutual trust is the prime factor we should make it happen. No, and how? That is the big questions. Anyways, based on the information I delivered to you, so we trying to make the platform. We will start from the Korea side. This is the platform named AORA. AORA means Alliance for Our Responsible Actions. That one is our NGO. I mentioned in the Climate Change Center, CCC, of Korea, and then ArtiECO provide the technical support to establish the AORA, the voluntary market, the platform, in April 2022. Our goal is activating Korea, the VCM market, and also the facilitating the access to the VCM by Korean companies, stakeholders to this market. Also responding to the global climate changes. That is the mission to achieve. Main function is registration and also certification, including the validation to this market to reduce the greenhouse gas. Also supporting the voluntary carbon credit trading through the marketplace. So that on whole included in AORA. So this is the schemes you see. So AORA has the basic functions, and we have a supplier, the buyer, and also registry system, and also the trading systems. We will collaborate with the global platforms like Gold Standard and the Vera, also the American Carbon Registry, the blah blah. There are many very big global players there. Also we do the collaboration, the TSVCM and the VCMI, etc. Also, the marketplace, the global companies, we can do the business in the deal each other's. Also, we have in the finance and the collaboration team, and also validation verification team globally. That also we will to collaborate in the Korea government on the KETS systems, as you see in the below. So they already have a good in the market there, but they still need to improve, as I mentioned before. So this is the system that we are trying to achieve. Based on that, the problem is how, as I mentioned, is in the globally different in the rules, the different regulation, different understanding. So each in the stakeholders has that kind of concept. That's why we suggest that it's a blockchain will be the key, the engine, but there's still it's a lot of blockchains and it has some problems. As you see recently, a lot of news from the globally, right? So like as we may see that we have a lot of in the mainnet, the Bitcoin, Ethereum, and also the Hyperledger, and also some EOS. Too many mainnet engines and has their own schemes. The problem is they are not like the eco-friendly. So that's why we will suggest that our mainnet AORA is one of the best solutions to also help in our environment, to reduce the gas usage. So in the 5 sectors for the blockchain, the speed, and also decentralization and the scalability and the smart contract, the storage section, all those in the 5 key sectors we covered almost like perfectly. So that's why I think the system AORA will help not only in the Korea market but also globally. That I can promise to you. So then it can also solve a lot of problems now we are facing about the global corporations. Okay, that's all today I prepare for you, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex. Third speaker is Daniela from GGGI.
Super. Thank you very much for the invitation to come and join the panel. I'd like to row back quite a bit. I don't know about anyone else, but by the time we've got 4 blockchain systems and cryptocurrency, I start to get a little bit lost. So, forgive me, this is maybe for those in the room that aren't so familiar with everything in the voluntary and compliance carbon markets, to try and explain how these two can work together. So to give a little bit of context, I'm going to make a guess that I'm a winner. Who are GGGI and why are we able to speak about this? So we are an intergovernmental organization focused on supporting its member countries on a pathway of green growth. We do this by supporting our members by sitting within their ministries. So we are embedded in each of our member countries, the recipient countries. So we have offices in about 40 countries around the world. And we support by helping the governments change policy, by writing regulation that puts them on a green growth pathway, and by helping them to access finance. So if we think about that in a carbon context, that would be, for example, helping to write an international Article 6 carbon regulation, or writing a carbon tax regulation. And then the finance angle, we're accessing climate finance through parties such as the GCF and directly with donors, but then also looking at carbon finance. And that's the area that I look after within GGGI. So what do we do in carbon? It's always fun to see if your country's on the map or not. I hope it is. In carbon, we're working in about 10, 12 countries at the moment. We work across 3 programs funded by the Swedish government, the Norwegians, and the Germans. We basically help countries to understand market dynamics. These are all market dynamics. So this is Article 6, the voluntary market, all types of carbon trading, land-based, renewable energy, transport. It could be policy approaches, project-based, so helping them understand it. Very importantly, helping them to put the governance in place that's needed to do the complex requirements of Article 6, so the authorizations, helping to ensure that the regulations and strategies are in place, then technical assistance to link with others rather than try and do everything ourselves. We work very much with other parties, so UNDP have some really good training programs that they've just brought out. The World Bank has the climate warehouse and all the data layers that are underneath it, so working with many other parties. Then we're working very strongly on identifying the pipeline. So what are the activities that are going to be able to generate carbon credits in all their forms, emission reductions or mitigation actions, activities. And then finally, we help with the transactions. So this could be anything from contractually looking at a mitigation outcome purchase agreement or government-to-government bilateral agreements, to other types of transactional documentation. And our aim ultimately is to open up international carbon markets in order to find a fair price for carbon that everyone can employ to then increase ambition. Okay, so if we just step back of where we were before, and why do we call these markets the voluntary markets and the compliance market? Before Paris, we had the Clean Development Mechanism, who my fellow panelists will be more than familiar with. And you could use, the Clean Development Mechanism was where you could develop a project in a non-Annex 1 country and then trade it and sell it to the European market or other buyers, the Japanese market, the Korean market. And those buyers had regulation that allowed the purchase of those credits. And they were seen as bona fide compliance market. But what really made that the compliance market was it came under the CDM, which meant it came under a set methodology. And there's only about 300 methodologies. The voluntary market was really created because there were there were activities that couldn't fit under some of the methodologies. So a parallel market was created. But unfortunately, the Europeans hadn't said, well, we'll take any carbon credits. They just said, well, we'll take CDM credits to add into our domestic EU ETS. So that was no longer possible to sell to the European compliance buyers. So they had to sell to philanthropic buyers or those looking to invest in green and good programs. So we saw sustainability departments, ESG targets, CRMs from the corporates. Now this gives a slight idea of how these markets have moved. This is a graphic from the World Bank State and Trends of Carbon Pricing. So the CDM market, and it was alluded to in one of the earlier presentations, the thought is a compliance market will gain a higher price. There's no guarantee for that, and certainly at the moment that's not the case. But if you say, okay, yes, it's going to get a higher price, this is where you see this dark blue section and the huge volume going up and then dropping off a cliff in 2012. It was actually the interest, as more than one of the panelists here and I were in the markets at the time. It was actually about 2011 when we knew that the EU was no longer going to be a buyer. And the delay shown on the graphic is because it's talking about credits issued, which takes the time to go through the UNFCCC system. But what we're seeing now is voluntary credits taking a massive, or certainly a sizable uptick. Most of those, interestingly, 75% of all voluntary credits issued so far are related to avoided deforestation, which is actually currently quite questioned by many in the market and in the space here as to whether that is truly additional or not. It's certainly saving the destruction of rainforests, but is that enough? Should we actually only be looking at removals by afforestation? So the carbon market does create some great opportunities by bringing these two sides together and looking at the voluntary and Article 6 together. But generally, pricing carbon incentivizes mitigation. You have a flow of inflow of revenue, you have technology transfer, and don't forget, even though countries are selling the carbon reductions, they're selling the IPMOs, they're selling the VRs, whatever you're calling them, the sustainable co-benefits stay in the country, the green jobs, the improved access to services, the improved livelihoods, the clean air, etc. The challenges, however, is around if we look at something like environmental integrity. So these are the questions that have been brought up around double counting or double claiming. There's a potential for fraud. We've recently heard in a Latin American country, unscrupulous agents going into the countryside and trying to buy non-existent carbon reductions from farmers, asking them for a prepayment, and they'll be made rich in the future, and then absconding with the money. Corporate disclosures, what are you saying? What is your claim? And potentially the challenge that there is this price differential. So how can we change that? And what can we do to bring markets together? So the beautiful thing about Article 6, or theoretically the beautiful thing about Article 6 is Article 6.2 allows you to trade everything. So we've now removed that problem we had before of only certain methodologies would ever fit into a compliance market. Now it doesn't matter what the standard is. It doesn't matter whether it's Plan Vivo, whether it's gold standard, whether it's old CDM, UNFCCC methodology. You can trade anything as long as you have a buyer and a seller, both believing that the credits have environmental integrity, are permanent, are additional, and are not double counted, then you can trade under Article 6.2. 6.4 is the more centralized system, doesn't exist yet, give it a couple of years. The UNFCCC guys are working hard on it at the Secretariat. That will be effectively more similar to the old CDM. With the voluntary market, you can just apply, or what was the VCM. Now, if you simply apply a corresponding adjustment, if you wish to, then you can say, effectively, it's part of what would have been referred to as the compliance market. Now, there are a lot of countries, because we deal with governments, as said, so we deal with the countries who are buyers and sellers in this market. And many of them are still saying, well, I don't know what to do. What do I apply corresponding adjustments to everything? Nothing? How does this work? So a few principles have been issued, like the San Jose principles, where some countries have made statements about applications of corresponding adjustments. Note there, they haven't said for everything. It might only be for some trades. So this graphic, and if you have poor eyesight like me, I apologize if you can't read it. I mean, effectively, it's just graphically saying what some of the other presentations have already said, which is you have in the blue boxes here different standards and mechanisms. What you're saying in the green and the red box is, okay, do we authorize? Authorize means agree to do a corresponding adjustment or not. If you do, you can then sell it for a buyer country to use it as their NDC. It can be used in the voluntary offsetting market, and it can be used by the CORSIA offset scheme. If you don't, it could still be used in a robust domestic market. Think about the Colombian offset market, Renare, which uses they apply a transportation carbon tax on fuel, and you're allowed to offset part of that if you buy into local Colombian forestry credits or markets. And then lastly, what many of my colleagues here have been talking about, the voluntary market, and that's whether you do or don't apply a corresponding adjustment. So what are the advantages of applying an authorization? And this isn't to say that one should or one shouldn't. This is just to say what are the advantages of doing that if you are a seller country. You get to check whether that project is actually aligned with what your country wants to achieve if you're the government. So you say, yes, this is working towards our very hard worked upon economic growth plans, our long-term low emission development strategies, and of course our NDCs. And nearly always we're looking for it to be additional to the NDCs, or well, certainly additional to current actions. Then the perception is compliance markets will eventually, when both markets are active, retain a higher price. So again, I stress there's no guarantee of that, but that has been the case in the past. And importantly, it also reduces the potential for fraud, because you are checking every trade before it happens, so everybody knows that if they're approached by someone to do a carbon trade, they can say, oh, well, does the government know about it, and is it on the website, and is it okay? So it does help with the reduction of sale of fake credits. But note, I could change the title of this slide and just say advantages of a carbon database. It doesn't need to be a whole authorization and apply corresponding adjustments. Maybe as a country, you actually want to say, well, we'll just put a database together with a website, and we'll say all trades anything we sell out of the country will have to be in this database. And then anyone can check it at any time. So anyone I sell it to can check what that trade is and can see that I am the buyer, or that the buyer before me was the buyer, and therefore it's not been double sold or double. I can see that it's a bona fide trade and the government is on board with it. So I'm helping the government to reach and achieve and go beyond their Paris goals. So it's not all about just a corresponding adjustment or not. For seller countries, it's also about just understanding what's going on in the country. And if I give you a very quick illustration of that. So if I am country Y, I am a large island nation, I have some activities that I want to sell as projects. Some are in forestry. So I sell those forestry projects, and in a few years' time, someone comes back and says, oh, hold on, the buyer, an NGO has investigated the buyer because they're a high-profile corporate buyer, and they've said, oh, hold on a second, you bought credits from a forestry project that displaced people, so they're no longer allowed to go and visit their religious burial grounds. So then there is a very bad report, and the buyer tries to make amends, and the country government makes sure the buyer makes amends. Then another project happens, and something similar happens. What will happen in that case is that buyers who are willing to pay good prices will turn around and say, I don't want to buy anything from that country because I know that there's been some bad cases in that country, and I feel a little unsure in case it might happen again, because that's going to be all over my annual report and at my shareholders meeting. So through no fault of their own, the country government, although trying to help and sell credits and get money in to achieve their goals, have now reduced the value that they can get on all carbon credits they sell. So there is a thought to say maybe you want to keep an eye on what you're selling from a country. So in conclusion, there's significant growth in the market and there can be interlinkage between both. Not full, maybe partial, maybe just an acknowledgement. The quality of credits is really important. So we have robust standards. We have plenty of standards in the market. We should use them. And governments have a role to play. Maybe a small role, maybe a large role. But it could potentially affect us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for excellent presenting. All right. Next, the Pedro will discuss about the carbon quality.
Thank you. Thank you firstly to the Climate Change Center and their partners for arranging this wonderful event and for the invite. And also thank you to some of the speakers before me for some of the wonderful comments and insightful comments that are completely important for a functioning VCM. I think where I would potentially want to take this conversation towards is more about how we can ensure that a robust VCM is important and is critical for a climate vulnerable country like Pakistan. So by now, I'm sure we've all seen the pictures of the dramatic flooding event in Pakistan over the last year, and over the past decade as well, we've seen dramatic climate events hit the country. But what I want to sort of take the conversation towards is some of the cold, hard numbers from these events. So as of now, the estimated damage from the climate events that occurred in Pakistan in the past year is over $40 billion. And this does not even take into account the annual funding that we require, that Pakistan requires for climate adaptation and building more resilience, which is upwards of $15 billion per annum as of current estimates. We've all seen the number of people that we've been displaced. More than 30% of the country is now extreme weather events, and we've had more than 28 super floods over the past, since our inception, and this number is supposed to increase over the next decade. Unfortunately, the problem then comes to the first box, which is where is this funding going to come from? Unless there's a loss and damage framework that's come into place, which seems unlikely right now, it's not going to happen. Similarly, there are very limited sources of funding that Pakistan has currently available to be able to address its climate problem, which is where the organization, the Pakistan Environment Trust, was set up, the organization that I represent. The idea was to sort of really identify the white spaces, the areas, and the programs that can be scaled up to bring in and leverage climate finance into Pakistan to address some of our dramatic challenges. The primary program identified was trying to identify voluntary carbon markets, an opportunity in the voluntary carbon markets as identified under the Carbon Pathways program, where Pakistani projects and programs will try to tap into the global VCM. The second program that we have is around Rewild Pakistan, which is again focused around ecosystem restoration and building a future for Pakistan that is climate resilient, low carbon, and biodiverse. And our final flagship program is again addressed around industrial decarbonization called Net Zero Pakistan, where again the idea is to sort of really bring in global climate finance to help Pakistani industries decarbonize, but then also be able to tap into a global drive towards gradual decarbonization. So coming back to the discussion, we've talked about how there is a dramatic funding gap that Pakistan currently faces. And that's where the voluntary carbon markets represent massive potential for the country. As of right now, estimates from the TSVCM and McKinsey indicate that the voluntary carbon markets may grow to $100 billion by 2030. Well, on that trajectory, Pakistan's NDCs currently communicate emissions reductions of 300 million tons per annum. But based on that, the size of the current carbon market potential from the country, based on very conservative estimates, based on current pricing trends, and also the number of projects that are eligible for carbon offsets, we see this potential bringing in at least $500 million per annum in terms of revenue from offset sales. But that is the critical part of the issue. However, as of now, the question becomes, why hasn't Pakistan as a country been able to really leverage climate finance, and especially carbon finance, in a meaningful manner? And that is something that I see also besetting a lot of countries from the global south. And a critical part of that is the first question of low investment in projects. And I think that's, the term itself can be bifurcated into two areas. While since the inception of the CDM and the growth of the VCM, there have only really been 14 projects, 1-4, that have continued to issue offsets. But hopefully this trend is continuing to change as more and more mechanisms such as GCC come up. But as of right now, that is what we see as the current market trend. And that is down to two major factors. A lot of that investment is coming into renewable energy projects, projects where additionality is becoming more and more difficult. But the other side of the issue is the high transaction costs of actually accrediting projects. The problem is that a lot of the good, high quality projects such as community-based and high impact projects tend to get crowded out or by the higher transaction costs, which do not result in the projects resulting in issuance. The second thing that is linked to that is that over the years, projects have gone to the project inception node stage, but haven't really gone beyond that. More than 30% of, actually only 30% of projects actually make it beyond the PIN stage from Pakistan. And again, a critical factor that sort of comes in there is down to a lack of capacity, a lack of local development capacity, both in terms of developing projects, but actually having the understanding and know-how around MRV, around reporting and monitoring frameworks, as well as the actual project design. And I think the final sort of component here then comes into the enabling policy environment. Due to sort of the ongoing discussions around Article 6.2 and 6.4, as earlier alluded to, that is something that will help clear up a lot of the local consternation about what the voluntary carbon market feeds into NDCs, into Pakistan's NDCs, and how does it sort of compete vis-a-vis the compliance market. And that is wherein local sort of policy, enabling policy, but also partnerships with global potential will be able to create greater understanding. So now we have to look at the role PET is currently playing in this landscape. So when we sort of started out, we looked at the existing projects, existing programs, where who we can partner with and work with and enable them to scale up some of their ambitions. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, there wasn't a lot of local capacity to actually build up and scale up projects, particularly in nature-based solutions, in areas such as sort of clean cooking. So what we've started doing is acting as the real market maker, starting really from project origination to actually, bringing in global expertise when it comes to sort of the carbon development, helping build up that local expertise. Also trying to raise the necessary finance and capital that's ready to to develop these projects, and eventually sort of going on to the whole commercialization phase as well. And the reason for us to do that is that VCM does have tremendous potential for a resource-scarce country like Pakistan. But the primary fact is that, beyond its mitigation benefits, VCM projects can actually lead to enhanced resilience. The mangrove projects coming from Pakistan have very demonstrable impacts on actual adaptation and resilience. Similarly, more afforestation projects up in the northern side of Pakistan have similar benefits. Again, developing and designing greater projects with co-benefits can result in enhanced jobs and employment opportunities and economic opportunities for community members, such as sort of NTFPs. Similarly, what we've seen is that enhancing or restoring some of the ecosystems in the northwestern part of Pakistan have resulted in actually enhancing ecotourism opportunities. And finally, I think one of the things that Pakistan does tend to face is a lack of climate resilient agriculture. We are facing climate insecurity. With practices such as regenerative and climate smart agriculture, that is another area that VCM can really help Pakistan address its sort of climate problems. Over the past sort of few years since our inception, and PET has only really been around for 2 years, what we've been able to do is identifying these pilots, these white spaces across Pakistan, working with communities to identify afforestation and agroforestry projects that are also eligible for carbon offsets, working with sort of other communities to identify clean cooking opportunities, developing those partnerships, local partnerships to be able to develop, design, and scale up projects. And that has really been the work we're doing. We've also been working with public sector institutions, provincial governments in Pakistan, trying to identify how we can utilize REDD Plus and avoided deforestation frameworks to also tap into carbon finance eventually help them scale those opportunities up as well. But the real sort of question for us is again, for us the real way forward is to building local capacity, to develop high quality bankable carbon projects. It's also about leveraging the global VCM space and then creating that brand for projects from Pakistan, but also the global south that have the high quality agenda attached to them. And then eventually also building an enabling policy landscape for a thriving voluntary carbon offset market from Pakistan in conjunction with Pakistan's NDCs and its VCM, its NDC commitments. So as of now, what we are looking forward for the next 3 years is to firstly develop a carbon fund for Pakistan, a $25 million carbon fund for Pakistan, where the primary objective is to actually invest in projects that are very early stage, that to actually incubate projects that not only have additionality, but have demonstrable benefits beyond emissions reductions. And that is the ambition that we have in trying to sort of develop partnerships around that. The second is, as mentioned earlier, is to sort of create a local, not a marketplace when we talk about in the sense of an exchange, but mostly a platform where expertise can be shared locally with small project owners, with community-based project owners that can then be used to bring down transaction costs associated with project development, but then also allow access and more transparency for project developers, with community-based project developers to global markets. And finally, building partnerships both regionally and globally with voluntary carbon market initiatives across the globe, such as the one that's sort of already being worked on by Korea. And that is the potential, the focus for us as we grow the VCM market in Pakistan. So again, thank you for your time, and I look forward to connecting with all of you ahead of the session, after the session, as well as answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, and I really apologize for the Hassan because I changed the orderings. Because of the COVID, sometimes my brain is not working well, so I apologize. Now, there is Pedro. We'll be discussing about the carbon credit quality.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll try to be very quick, see if we have even time for if only one question. My name is Pedro Barata. I'm Associate Vice President of EDF, and I'm here to talk to you about a project that wants to answer to the question of what is quality in the voluntary carbon market. So we've heard already here from project developers, from standard setters such as GCC, but the reality is that this is a market, unlike compliance markets, this is a market that is wholly dependent on the social trust that buyers in particular, but society in general, will have on the quality of what is being produced in the market. So EDF, Environmental Defense Fund, partnered with Oeko-Institut of Germany and World Wildlife Fund to essentially, in a transparent, provide transparent information on quality of carbon credits. The idea is that this enables users to identify carbon credits that deliver higher climate mitigation impacts and that offer greater social and environmental benefits. So why we're doing it? Because as we've seen, carbon markets are facing a resurgence, but that resurgence will, if we keep on in a climate or an environment of mixed bag quality, that resurgence, I would say, our adventure is at stake. So buyers face reputational risks if the emission reductions are not credible. What we want to do is we want to enhance the integrity of overall carbon credits, and we want to encourage carbon credit programs such as the GCC, project developers such as the PET, and other market participants to pursue the highest standards. How do we do it? We essentially, as with some other rating agencies, we use independent user-friendly scorings to assess the quality of carbon credits. And we do it for everyone in the market and everyone in the stakeholder community around the voluntary carbon market. So countries, companies, investors, and even the individuals. The way we differentiate this initiative from others in the market, we're not funded by revenues related to carbon credits. So a project developer cannot come to CCQI and ask for its project rating. We're not a rating agency in that commercial sense. We are independent. Our teams are experts, some with decades in the carbon market, that are not employed by project developers or by carbon crediting programs. Unlike other initiatives, such as the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market, with which I'm also associated as co-chair of the expert panel, we are not here to distinguish on a binary, in a binary way between good and bad. We score from 1 to 5 on several different quality criteria. Our methodology is fully transparent and is easily accessible and downloadable from our website. And as mentioned before, all of our scores are free of charge. Where are we in terms of project implementation? We're now in phase 4. We have developed, we started with detailing criteria for assessing carbon credit quality. We developed a robust methodology. We started with a limited demo application of scorings that we already had prepared and presented last year at the Glasgow COP. And we're now at the phase where we are already assessing carbon crediting programs and project methodologies. What are we assessing? We're assessing along 7 categories of quality objectives. These are some, let's say, traditional carbon credit quality criteria, such as the robust determination of GHG emissions impact, i.e. how robust are the quantification protocols that different programs and different methodologies are using, avoiding double counting, avoiding non-permanence, so making sure that a credit is permanent, strong institutional arrangements and processes, so looking at the governance of different carbon crediting programs, and environmental and social impacts. To these, let's say, traditional quality criteria, we're heading, because we are in a Paris environment now, we're heading host country ambition and the criteria on facilitating transition to net zero emissions. What do we assess? We assess the quality of different types of carbon credits according to some key parameters. The type of carbon credit project activities, for example, landfill gas utilization. The carbon crediting program, and underneath the carbon crediting program, the quantification methodology that is being used. We also assess we distinguish between different host countries in relation to things like the additionality and the embedding of the methodology, or the embedding of the methodology, into the host country NDC, and whether or not a credit is seeking authorization for use under Article 6. In doing this, we are not competing with rating agencies when we not have the capacity to do individual project ratings. So some people would question, then why exactly are you doing? We're rating a project type. That means that we cannot go to the level of due diligence that in many cases the carbon market requires, but we offer a valid information point on what these particular 3 environmental organizations and think tanks believe to be quality. In terms of where we are, we have already scored out several carbon crediting programs. You see their logos there, the ACR, VCS, Gold Standard, CAR, and the CDM. Similar to some host countries for which we have already developed assessment sheets on their NDCs, and a to date yet limited set of quantification methodologies. we are on track now to cover essentially 80% of of the existing carbon market issued credits by the third quarter of next year. In terms of how these scores are to be used, we see several potential uses. For buyers, they can be used as part of the due diligence that any buyer should be undertaking in the purchase of carbon credits. For carbon credit programs, these are again an information point on how their product is being perceived, in particular by environmental NGOs. For project developers, they can inform how to design a project to avoid specific risks and to choose programs and methodologies within their project type that have higher quality assurance. As I mentioned, we've just released on our website scores for some programs, including 2 complementary standards, various SD Vista and CCBS. We are on track to assess at least 5 more project types by the end of this year, including grid-connected solar power, wind power, methane emissions from oil and gas flaring, and avoidance of methane from leaks in natural gas pipelines and from livestock manure management. And we are hoping, like I said, to upscale this to 80% of the market by the third quarter. With this, thank you very much. I hope we still have some time for questions.
All right. All right. Thank you very much, Pedro. Yeah. Is there any other questions? If you have, please identify yourself and then, yeah, okay. Do you have a mic? Maybe you can speak a little louder. Or yeah. Okay, just a second.
Yeah, just 2 questions. One is very simple in the sense that is the voluntary term still applicable at this juncture of the time? Because voluntary means somewhat discretionary, and at the kind of the height of events what we are into, is that the right term to be used? So that's the one. The second one is regarding the quality. How do you measure permanence? And especially vintage, what does it take? I mean, even today, although some of the registries have something around vintages, but even today I know that very, very old credits are still being traded. So what does it take on that? Thank you.
In terms of the quality, I think, Pedro, you can have.
So on permanence, you can check our methodology, but there are specific criteria. They relate to depending on the approach that is taken. So there are several approaches in the voluntary carbon market to address permanence, from temporary credits under the CDM to obligations to monitor and compensate for reversals. In the approach, which is really the most generic approach of using buffer pools to address permanence, what we have is 2 things, 2 basic criteria. A program will score higher on permanence the longer it commits to monitoring and compensate for reversals. As you know, there's a large disparity in the market, from standards that go as low as 1 year to standards that go as high as 100 years. The second point is detailed requirements on the composition of buffer pools. If the mechanism to compensate for permanence is the fact that you've put aside credits for addressing that risk, then we have to understand how much you've put aside, so the type of the amount that you've put aside, but also the quality of what you've put aside, and the conditions under which that buffer pool is going to be used. That's essentially how we would try to address. Just generically, quality is always going to be very much subjective. But what we're trying to do with CCQI is offer a point of, let's say, a port of call for those who want to address this issue of quality and understand it. You may even disagree with some of our scorings. That's perfectly fine. We've had very hearty disagreements with some of the programs, as all of you will understand. but that doesn't prevent us from trying to get to a certain basic level of understanding of what this means. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody who can answer the number one questions?
And yes, we do have in the quantification protocol section, or in the additionality section, sorry, we have lower scorings for longer or prior vintage credits. So, in other words, if a vintage is old, there is an assumption that the additionality may be lower for various reasons. We can then offline go into that.
Okay. Okay, since we don't have too much time, I think we have to making a closing remark. So let me invite Ms. Hajar Khamlichi from Morocco, OPEMH. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So, over the past 2 decades, the emergence of multiple carbon market segments has led to the fragmentation of governance of international carbon markets. International baseline and credit systems for greenhouse gas mitigation have been repeatedly expected to wither away, but in fact, it shows significant resilience over the years. Still, the two parties agreements have struggled to finalize rules of the market-based cooperation under the Article 6, which are still being negotiated so far. Generally, there is tension between international top-down and the bottom-up governance. The voluntary carbon markets governed bottom-up and outside of the Kyoto Protocol by private institutions have recently gained importance by offering complementary project types and methodological approaches. The clear intention of some parties to use market-based cooperation in order to reach their nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, to the Paris Agreement has led to an ongoing process of navigating the alignment of these fragmented carbon market instruments with the implementation of NDCs and the Paris Agreement's governance architecture. So, in our panel, we discussed emerging features of international carbon market governance in the public and private domains, including political and technical issues. Carbon markets are growing rapidly, but there are increasing concerns regarding the integrity and quality of credits. Article 6.2 provides a framework that can also cover the VCM activities by allowing for the authorization of credits by host countries' engagements. Although authorizing credits generated on VCM can help ensure integrity and align mitigation efforts to national goals, but it could delay the development of markets. VCMs can raise private sector finance to fund NDCs and help increase their ambition. The host parties may consider opening climate funds that will charge the fees to take care of additional climate actions towards the corresponding adjustments they apply. So this will provide additional finance for innovative climate action in countries. And the global trend says VCM carbon offsetting will be a great solution. As for other countries, such as Korea, it needs to boost its VCM for stronger climate action, as well as for Pakistan, where mobilizing carbon finance is important to develop community-centric last-mile energy access, and nature-based projects such as clean cooking and afforestation and reforestation. Several initiatives are developing at national levels, such as AORA, the VCM approach, which was recently launched in Korea to improve access to voluntary carbon markets. We have also seen the carbon credit quality initiatives founded by Environmental Defense Fund and the WWF US and Oeko-Institut, the German think tank, that provides transparent information on the quality of carbon credits. This enables users to understand what type of carbon credits are more likely to deliver actual emissions reductions and social environment benefits. It is highly recommended to build a natural capital database for countries to help create a pipeline of bankable carbon projects for the country, and setting up the linkages with global experts to build on the capacities for developing projects while creating enabling policy landscape. So, I hope this session was insightful for the attendants. Thank you. So, in the name of the Moroccan Alliance for Climate Change and Sustainable Development, the Observatory of the Protection of the Environment and Historical Monuments of Morocco, and Climate Change Center, and Oeko-Institut, co-organizers of this event, we really thank you for your agreeable attendance and your interest. Thank you so much, and looking forward to continue discussion.
Okay. Thank you very much, Hajar. Again, thank you very much for the audience for joining our Climate Change Center side event. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. Have a good afternoon. Thank you. I will finish this side event. Thank you. 수고하셨습니다.